For me, I think a voice and a song in particular carries with it a human experience at its simplest and often its rawest. Music has always been a vehicle for the spirit of people, the spirit of the times and the stories of people. And where we believe those stories, that's empathy in action. And that's where action can begin.
And I could cry.
Hi, I'm Hozier, and this is Cry Power, my podcast about people who are using what's available to them to change the world. Presented with our friends at Global Citizen, on each episode I'll be sitting down with people who are putting themselves out there to support a cause that's dear to them. I'll be talking to people whose work is making a real difference, musicians, artists, or just some of my heroes. It is an absolute honour to introduce my first guest, someone who has achieved incredible success in their field, someone who has been awarded 8 BRIT Awards and been dubbed the Brit's Champion of Champions, has received a Golden Globe Award and no less than 4 Grammys, has countless hits to their name and is responsible for helping shape genre and era-defining sounds. Not only that, we are talking about somebody who runs their own movement for gender equality called The Circle and has even been awarded an OBE for her humanitarian work, including the fight against HIV and AIDS. Annie Lennox, thank you so much for joining me.
I am very, very happy to be here, and I am delighted to see you and to have a chance to have this conversation with you today. The last time we were together, Andrew, because I like to call you Andrew.
Yeah, please do.
That's
please
okay.
Do. Absolutely.
Most of the world know you as Hozier, but I think Andrew's a very nice name.
Yeah,
Are you okay with that?
I've grown to be okay with it. Absolutely.
Oh, do you prefer Hozier?
I actually prefer Andrew. I would never introduce myself as Hozier. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so
personally, anyway. Yeah.
So it's a real pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
And the last time that we got together was in America, and it was a bit of a whirlwind, wasn't it? Because we were told we were going to do this song together, and then we were rehearsing in the hotel room, remember?
Yeah.
In Los Angeles.
I do indeed, actually, I do. Yeah,
it was very glamorous.
It was indeed, yeah. And that was all. I was green as the grass at the time. I mean, in a lot of ways, but yeah, definitely. I remember rolling up to I think it was the Chateau Marmont.
That's right.
Yeah. That's an intimidating.
I thought it might be an odd one for you, and I was thinking, God, we've never met each other before, and I didn't know if this notion of doing a duet together would appeal to you. But
I very much leapt at the chance. Yeah, I didn't think I would have clocked on your radar at all. So it was a little bit intimidating. But I have to say, like at first, but you were incredibly supportive, and also it was maybe one or two conversations that we had. I found you were very, very supportive, and I think you offered a lot of words of comfort and advice as well too, which I found incredibly helpful.
Well, what I found in you, to be honest, is that I know you to be the real deal artist. I recognise that. So that not only are you a phenomenal singer, but you're a bard, you're a songwriter with a need to communicate to people, and a phenomenal guitar player and a musician all round. So to meet someone who's a stranger, but already you have these component parts, it meant that we have a lot in common, actually.
Yeah, I would think so, and well, thank you. I mean, that's ridiculous praise. There's no higher praise than yourself. Thank you very much. But yeah, for me, I would have removed a limb to.
Oh, that would not have been necessary.
It wouldn't have been necessary, maybe. But I have to say, it was an absolute pleasure, and also to work to stand on stage beside somebody with the kind of the legacy of what you've contributed to popular music as well too. Like I don't know if it's something that you kind of hold quite lightly, wear it lightly, but the landscape of pop music is still shaped by your work.
I do hold it lightly.
Yeah,
I hold it lightly on the one hand, and yet on the other hand, it is part of music. Is so much of. Did you just say the word landscape? You did. It's a landscape. It's an interior landscape for me as well as being an exterior one, and a whole history with music, and it has shaped my life, and music is always regenerating itself. I find constantly. That's the thing. I always knew that music defines change in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, very much so.
As well as being the accompaniment to people's lives, it actually defines the times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of. it's a real vehicle for the zeitgeist in a lot of ways.
Exactly, exactly. So this is a really unusual thing, and I think it's great, and I think it's a testimony to you that Global Citizen have asked you to host a series of conversations with people. I'm going to be I've asked them about this. They say I'm the first.
Yeah.
So I'm really honoured to be the first person to talk, and I'm excited to have you ask me questions.
No, thank you. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I'll ask you a few questions as well.
Please do. Yeah, please do. No, it is an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much again for sitting down. First and kind of foremost, I was hoping to ask you how you got into, or what spurred you into activism in the first place.
There's so many little things, little aha moments throughout my life that made me aware, as a young girl coming from the northeast of Scotland. My parents and my grandparents were actually social activists.
Okay.
Yeah. In that period, from the end of the First World War and just before the Second World War began, there was the rise of fascism on the streets, and my grandparents were young working class workers, but they went out in Aberdeen, where I come from, to fight fascism at the factory gates. And so they printed out leaflets and handed things out, and they were very, very active. I believe my grandfather was actually imprisoned on one occasion. There was a big fight got up in the streets of Aberdeen between the fascists and the sort of socialist uprising. It's very interesting.
That's amazing. Okay.
So it is, activism is a family thing for me, and also that sense of disparity and injustice is something that I've always felt, even when I was a very young girl, as I said, not only because my on one side of my family there was an activist thread, but also just because of that empathy. I think when you have empathy for others and you see injustice, you feel very hurt by it. There's a pain that comes with that, and that pain must be expressed in some way. For me, I never wrote activist songs, but I always felt this this discomfiture about how can I say, it's the expression of the internal world, the expression of the soul, the expression of the intellect, and the connection that you are seeking as an artist to engage with your audience and to bring them on your journey, and to waken up the parts of them that may be asleep or that may want to be connected with.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I was born in 1954. So the civil rights movement was burgeoning in America, and there was still segregation in America at that time. So musicians of colour had to use different, as we know as musicians, they weren't allowed to perform in this, to come through the same hotels' doors or use the same restrooms. It's just, it's just mind-boggling, really. And I was very affected by the notion of apartheid in South Africa. That really had a tremendous impact on me. And actually, when it came to the point where Eurythmics were actually up and running, we were part of the Rock Against Racism kind of collaboration that took part, and we performed for Nelson Mandela's birthday celebrations when he turned 75, was still incarcerated in Robben Island. And this was just before, quite a few years before apartheid was overcome. But that concert definitely contributed to raising awareness about the apartheid movement and the injustices of apartheid. And the young generation at that point all sort of seemed to be in agreement that apartheid needs to be done away with everywhere around the globe. So that movement there helped to contribute to the tipping point. And there was no question about it that, apartheid should never exist anywhere in any country of the world. Yeah. And then I watched the follow-on from that was watching the Berlin Wall come down, and the sort of end of the Cold War, that period where there was the Iron Curtain, and a huge, huge divide between the Western world and the Soviet Union at the time.
But even, I suppose, what's interesting, I mean, as world political events go, these are, two huge
They certainly were.
Huge upheavals of kind of...
They were hugely significant historical events.
Ultimately, a very interesting time of human action actually coming to fruition.
Actually coming into fruition.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one felt like, wow. And as Mandela actually said, we must have hope over despair. And I think we are living in times that are very, very confusing and very, very polarizing, and that it is hard for us, all of us, to feel hopeful when one sees such negativity everywhere, and you start to feel, wow, even when I think back on those tremendous steps forward, sometimes humanity takes several steps forward and several steps back at the same time.
Yeah.
So I absolutely think that there are some remarkable songs and performances now, and to name one would be Childish Gambino. And what's the song called? This is not America.
This is
This
America.
is America.
Yes,
So as I'm thinking of the David Bowie song, This is not America. Childish Gambino's This is America. But seeing his video and listening to that song was a revelation for me. And I can tell you that I had goosebumps watching it, because I was like, oh my God, this is another wave of civil rights now. Activist kind of waking people up, showing the mirror back to the general kind of American and the world, not just the American public, and the world in the fresh new generation way of saying, this is where we're at right now. And it seemed to sum everything up in a genius way.
Yeah, it was quite... It's an arresting piece of work. Yeah, it really is.
You think?
Yeah. But,
wow.
Yeah, and I suppose talk about it, a song being a vehicle for the zeitgeist, or being a signal booster for the times, and for the sentiment of the people. Yeah, it's
and some.
Yeah, it is amazing. The Cry Power podcast will explore the UN's 17 global goals, a series of objectives that aims to end extreme poverty, reduce inequality, and tackle climate change by 2030. Today's show focuses on global goal number 5, total gender equality. As people would know, I am very pro-feminist, which to me that means one thing, that men and women are equal in every single way. That equality with regards economic opportunities and education is achievable and should be fought for. To take action on any of these issues we talk about on the show, go to globalcitizen.org/crypower and get involved. Also that upbringing which informed your ethos and informed your sense of empathy, and how did that lead you to founding The Circle?
Oh, it's a long journey.
Okay.
Shall we? You prepared for a long story?
I love a long story.
Okay, a long story.
Yeah.
I'll try and keep it succinct.
Okay.
Well, I've been involved with different organisations over the years, and Amnesty International and Greenpeace, but the one, and Comic Relief. I must admit, my experiences with Comic Relief have been extraordinary. But there was one catalysing moment when I was invited to go and perform for the launch concert in Cape Town for Nelson Mandela's HIV AIDS organisation, 46664, which was actually Mandela's former prison number while he was incarcerated in Robben Island. And I took part in that concert, and there were some incredible artists there. Beyonce, Youssou N'Dour, Bono was there, Peter Gabriel was there. And so it was an incredible event. And Mandela took us to Robben Island the day before the concert. And he gave a press conference to the world. And he was talking about the HIV AIDS pandemic as it was playing out in southern Africa, where they had the highest incidence of the virus. And it was particularly affecting women and girls. And as a mother and a woman myself, I was shocked, because he described it as a genocide. And I thought, hang on a minute, wake me up. I'm standing here on Robben Island witnessing Nelson Mandela in front of his former prison cell, post-apartheid, and he's saying that a genocide is taking place of HIV and AIDS that is affecting girls and women. They are at the front line of this pandemic. And I thought, the thing that really hit me most strongly was, why didn't I know about that? Why doesn't the world know about that? Is it that women and girls don't have a voice to talk about this disease? And actually, I learned subsequently that stigma plays a huge role when it comes to HIV. So that it suffers from silence. People do not like to just come out and say, "Oh, I'm HIV positive." It's a very, very challenging virus to live with in so many ways. In any case, that really was the moment in time for me when I said, I have to do something. I have to make a contribution here. And so subsequently, I went on trips to various HIV and AIDS projects, courtesy of Comic Relief. And you know how they take you to, in my case, it was to Uganda. And I went to see these HIV projects that were affecting women. And actually, those experiences of seeing women living in poverty who had been affected by HIV and AIDS, probably infected by their partner or their husband, trying to raise a family, but being kicked out of the home because they were the ones that were given responsibility of this virus, whereas they were actually the victims of their husbands, and the injustices of these personal life stories, and seeing the disempowerment of these women and girls at every level, and all the little journeys that I took and all the various people that I encountered in their various circumstances is something that is indelibly marked in my soul, to be frank with you. And as I went on learning more and more about HIV and AIDS and how it was impacting women and girls, I decided I must do something about that. But as you know, Andrew, everything is interconnected. So poverty impacts everything, and poverty impacts the lack of everything. So, lack of education, access to education, primary school education, secondary school education, college education. These are all a means out of poverty. And if there is a lack of access, then simply that cycle of poverty and suffering continues. And with girls, they are usually at the bottom rung of the ladder of civil rights and human rights.
Absolutely. As research shows, poverty leads oftentimes to a cycle of crime, addiction, etc., which, coupled with a lack of access to proper education, can lead to health issues, can lead to exposure to things like HIV and AIDS, etc. So it is a wider issue than just being poor or just poverty itself. It's a whole net of issues.
It's a very interesting thing that that people don't realize, that HIV and AIDS is one of the biggest causes of mortality in girls and women of reproductive age in Africa, in countries in Africa at this moment. It's HIV and AIDS is that killer of women and girls of reproductive age. And this is a huge, huge challenge. Already girls are faced with disempowerment because of poverty and lack of access to safe sex, lack of access to because of poverty, perhaps having many sexual partners, unprotected sex, having sugar daddies. Rape is another huge vehicle of transmission. So, sex is it's used as how would I say? An exchange. It's something one can. Sex work is a way of life for many girls living in poverty. Also, rape is just so much a practice in certain countries where men feel that this is an entitlement, where it's not even viewed as something that we would be horrified by. It's actually it's just normal. It's just it's a right. We have the right to rape. This is normal. And so what needs to happen in so many ways is, how do you change, first of all, social attitudes towards the devaluation and the objectification of women? And how do you change practices where people are so in need to have money that, unsafe sex is part of an exchange that is, and ironically, it's something that maybe to feed your family, but at the end of the day, it's also the way that you're going to contract HIV. It's sex, human behavior, human values, poverty. It's so, the picture is and the threads of the picture are so utterly complex the solutions are not straightforward, but there are solutions. And one of the solutions is getting tested. No, if, for example, everyone on the planet knew their status, very simply, go into a clinic, get tested, know whether you're HIV positive. And from that, know that, you either engage in safe sex or perhaps you abstain from, sex completely. And then you can quickly get onto treatment, which is life-saving and means that your children won't be left as orphans. Because, if you're going to die and you have children, unfortunately, and that's another issue with another side byproduct of AIDS is that millions of young children are obviously exposed to the virus. And, we're not even getting into pediatric AIDS because there's never really yet been an effective method of tackling pediatric AIDS, children living with the virus.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I'd read about the work of The Circle is it's putting pressure on politicians and lawmakers in places like Tanzania to provide legal protections for women in developing countries, such as that, for things like domestic violence and providing a living wage, etc.
Well, you've just mentioned The Circle, and The Circle is an organisation that works to support women and empower women living in probably the most disempowered places in the world, and that could be in parts of Africa, it could be in parts of Asia. I mean, it's actually we have a global issue with women and women working here. There are women that are experiencing sexual violence, domestic abuse, and The Circle's a small organisation. It was founded only recently as a formal charity about 3.5 years ago, but actually it started off informally about a decade ago, and it was just from an idea that I had to try to connect Western women, to engage them, to inspire them, to inform them about what is happening in the sisterhood of women globally, because the disparity between the Western world and what is going on elsewhere is absolutely shocking. I mean, for example, 2/3 of the world's adult illiterate are women. It's just, the facts are so horrendous. 1 in 3 women globally have experienced violence in their lifetimes. These kind of facts. So when we talk about feminism, from my perspective, I look at it as a global issue, not only as an issue that Western women talk about. So I came up with a term. It's not of my invention. I discovered this term, but I want to endorse the notion of the need for feminism and action all around the world. So this terminology of global feminism is something that I am advocating for really strongly at the moment. And I think there is such a need for us to join the dots and to be able to view feminism as a global movement, and feminism that is inclusive of men, that actually says men can be feminists too. And we need men to have a feminist ethos and to feel comfortable with the term feminism. If we precede it with the word global, I have a sense that men will be more comfortable with the terminology.
To take action on any of the issues we talk about on the show, go to globalcitizen.org/crypower to get involved. A movement of activists all over the world who are using their collective voice to end extreme poverty by 2030. So one of the ways in which I came to the work of The Circle was through a movement online, the hashtag One Reason Why I'm a Global Feminist, which you started. But
I saw it. I was so thrilled.
There was, but a lot of the facts, there was a lot of those were new to me as well too at the time.
Absolutely. I mean, I just basically, I'm just a person. I don't have any real power, but I just was thinking over the summertime, just to give you a little bit of a picture behind the One Reason Why I'm a Global Feminist campaign at the moment, is I went into a department store and I saw a Superwoman t-shirt with the logo of Superwoman on it. And I started looking at this thing and I thought, wow, Superwoman, wouldn't it be amazing if you wore the t-shirt and Superwoman could do all these things and make all these differences to women in the world? What would it be? So here is Superwoman on a t-shirt. So I wore the t-shirt And I found all these facts and statistics that are shocking, and they're true. They're all true, and they're so extreme that you'd hardly kind of warrant that in the world this is going on today, because it's almost medieval, to be quite frank with you. So they're superwoman, and they're the facts. And so what I thought was, I'll write the facts down just on a piece of ordinary drawing paper with a Sharpie, and just share here's one reason why I'm a global feminist. So what that does, that picture there, informs people of what's going on in the world, and identifies and connects you to that. And so if you were, hello listener, if you are at home right now and you want to do something, not just think about it, actually you might have a drawing pad or a piece of paper, write down your own reason why you think you are a global feminist, and you must put the hashtag one reason why I'm a global feminist. But have a think about what you might like to say. There are many, many reasons to become a global feminist. Now, I would encourage you, particularly if you are a man, you are not the feminist's enemy. You are actually, in my view, a very strong and strong potential ally. And it's very important in my view. And I know that this is quite a radical thing to say, because historically the feminist movement has kind of been a little bit allergic to men. My viewpoint is that if boys and men are not persuaded to understand what the challenges are, then in a sense we will never win over. Men must be persuaded, because they are the other half. We must work with men together. And that if you're going to be feminist, you must understand that as well as trying to work to get parity and representation, as in corporate, that we have so few CEOs, for example, in corporate world that are women. We still have such a desperate need to have more women represented in Parliament and governments everywhere around the world. Apart from these issues, we also need to understand that women and girls are dying of AIDS at reproductive age. We need to know this. We need to know that violence against women is absolutely a global issue. There are so many issues that feminism can address, needs to address, and we must. Hashtag Me Too has been phenomenal. It's created an amazing platform, so that the word feminist can come out, can become more strong, can be seen to be proactive and in the streets. We fought very hard to get that word back on track, and it is back on track, and it's very resonant. Only a few years ago, you couldn't even use the word feminist without people just kind of cringing.
Yeah, I was going to say it is remarkable. A few years ago, and even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of discussions that are taking place in and around the mainstream about just the experience of I'm sure living in our society, what it's like, what that day-to-day experience is as a woman. There was no platform for it.
There was no platform. There was no languaging for it.
Yeah, or it would have been completely, as you say, vilified, or
right.
It's somehow an incredibly divisive term. But something you'd said there about representation in Parliament, I think it was one of the facts that I had come to from I Am a Global Feminist Because movement was, roughly, I think it was 20%. So even on a global scale of Parliament representation, you're dealing with half of the world's population.
That's right.
Is represented.
We are half the world. Why are we not represented? Why are we not representing ourselves and our issues? We've taken that as norm for far too long. And, think back about our great-grandmothers in the suffragette movement. At the time, they thought women having the vote, what a preposterous idea. Women can't possibly vote. Women can't be lawyers. Women can't be doctors. Women can't be in professional... they can maybe be teachers. Maybe we can have women teachers, but they can't do anything else. I mean, once that norm is shifted, well, of course women can do these things. Women can do everything. So then what on earth were we thinking? This is why we have to be so grateful to the suffragette movement, because they actually really did sacrifice their lives at the time. I mean, it was a huge, huge struggle.
Absolutely. And I think definitely for me, and particularly for men of my generation, it's important to look back and see just how because there are dudes who, and I would speak to them and would have conversations with them who, again, and this is another reason why having a global outlook here is very, very important to see the bigger picture, but would regard in the world that they are living in their pocket of the world,
point, yes.
that there is no difference between men and women. There is no such.
Yes.
There is no need.
There's no need
for feminism. But when you look at it's quite
you mean?
remarkable.
Are you saying that there are men out there that think it's already done?
That
it's already sorted.
It's already done.
It is not sorted,
yes,
gentlemen.
Yeah. And
it's far from.
And
we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. When you look back to even recent history, so the suffragettes, when you look at how radical a system we're actually moving from to a place where we are saying, look, okay, let's try to find parity here. Even I believe in my lifetime, there was maybe, I think it was early 90s, or in some cases in the 80s, the very idea, let's say, that rape is something that can take place within a marriage was
right.
not on legal statutes. So
exactly.
we are moving from a place
yes, we are.
where women were essentially treated as property.
I think once you have I think nowadays we have a lot of dialogue, and I think the dialoguing is very important, very, very necessary, and that is. And I'm going to hark back. I'm going to push this terminology of global feminism again, because if you do not have the language, if you do not have the terminology, you don't have anything to describe the issues that are taking place. So if you use that term, global feminism, it's an umbrella term, and it's inclusive of men, and it's inclusive of everything that is happening, every colour, creed, caste. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. It's so. In feminism, at the moment, there are many different kind of beliefs and viewpoints and schisms, and there are there's some sort of infighting about what feminism is, interpreted in this way or that way. For me, I think when you have this term, you can say it's all under this umbrella. It all works. It can all do its own thing, and you can look at it as a universal human right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And in a lot of ways, the approach, there isn't a one size fits all approach for a discussion that is as
it doesn't need to be. Exactly. I mean, absolutely. Life is complex and subtle, and there are certain approaches that may not fit in certain countries, may not fit definitely, and we don't all have to be in total agreement. But this is a problem for the feminist movement, because I think all the schisms and the infighting can create divisiveness, and I think that is what has held us back in many ways. So again, I have to say, pushing the term, I think this is this inclusiveness allows us to go forward in a unified fashion, acknowledging that we have differences. Yeah. And we have slightly different beliefs here and there, but by and large, fundamentally, if we can connect ourselves with the facts and with the work that needs to be done all around the world, in terms of violence, in terms of disempowerment, lack of healthcare, lack of sexual and reproductive healthcare, lack of access to education. These are all the things I've just been saying before. If we can become familiar with what the issues are, then we can know where we have to head and what needs to happen, what needs to change.
If you find yourself inspired or angry, this podcast isn't just about talking. It's about making change happen, and you can do that right now. You can head to globalcitizen.org/crypower to take action on these issues. This is Hozier, and you're listening to my Cry Power podcast. We've spoken about a lot of things, a lot of kind of really, really difficult facts, a lot of harrowing facts, as well. The kind of where that ethos comes from, where hoping for change and engaging in action that will change that. The question being, where can people go to engage in that?
Yes, it's true. I mean, when you're right. I mean, you can be told about very harrowing statistics and facts, and then you would be persuaded to do something. And I guess that the listeners are thinking, well, what can I do? What can I actually do as an individual? And I think that can be the challenge for most people, even if they're persuaded, maybe they don't actually know what to do. And that is why an organisation like Global Citizen is so important, because once you're made aware that, oh, hang on a minute, if I log onto their website, Maybe they'll tell me of some kind of action that I can take just as an individual living in a town or city in the United Kingdom or wherever. Actually, I can take a small action that will contribute to a larger body of change and maybe even at this tipping point towards transformation, you know. I'm sitting on my couch at home, I'm watching this depressing documentary on Netflix. What can I do, isn't it? But I think that there are many, many things that individual people can do. I think there are organizations that you can join, you can support. Global Citizen, by all means, being one of the really upcoming, strong movements, new, fresh movements, and very, very resonant and relevant to what is going on today, addressing the issues that are going on today. And I think people feel isolated. I feel that we feel, and I include myself in this, that we feel that we're not part of a connectedness.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I was going to say in that is that, you know, how much power there really is in acting on a decision of conscience, and that feeling of powerlessness that sometimes we all feel is to me, there's something that very much defines our times and can oftentimes, you know, stem from this sense of our conscience and our natural sense of justice and conscience being violated by the shape of the world today. There is such power in acting upon your own sense of conscience, you know.
I know exactly what you mean. There's a sense of paralysis that comes over you, and because the challenges are so overwhelming. But I do feel that if you can take ownership of just one small piece of it, and you can contribute in your own way. You don't have to be Bill Gates, but you can do your own thing, you know. By the act of joining an organization like Global Citizen is actually an empowering act as and of itself.
Very much so, very much. And being informed and having access to, you know, we talked about, you know, information of understanding, but as you say, being part of that change, as you said yourself, watching the end of apartheid take place. Incredibly powerful.
So,
I
mean, we never thought at the time, really apartheid could ever be done away with. And I always refer to that because it was such an established, vile system. And not to say that there isn't an economic apartheid still in the country. There's just so many problems in South Africa. But nevertheless, apartheid was done away with. And hopefully it will never, ever return. And that's another thing, that if we're not careful, these kind of very divisive, polarizing, racist, bigoted thoughts and viewpoints and perspectives can come right back again. Don't just always assume that because they're done away with that they won't come back, because there's always a chance, you know.
No, absolutely, yeah. And there's echoes of a lot of that in many ways today. But
yes,
what is remarkable about an achievement like that is the small actions of individuals with conscience.
Correct.
And collectively that change is carried over the line.
Yes, many. And there's all those lovely analogies of the, you know, one starfish at a time being saved off the beach, or the ocean being made of infinite droplets of water. And that is what we are. We are all individual, and yet we are collective at the same time. And we've often lost that sense of connection because we do live in communities that are not really communities, that there is isolation. And, you know, big metropolises like London and New York and wherever you have it, people feel alone and feel despairing and feel hopeless and feel that this system is never going to facilitate them or include them. But, you know, you and I having this conversation today is part of the response to that. I mean, you and I are both ordinary citizens at the end of the day. Even if our names are well known, we are still just members of the world, and our journeys are short because we come here, we live, and we die, and that's it. And during your lifetime, you must decide whether you're going to just skate along and just pursue your own selfish interest, perhaps, or whether you're going to get involved in it with a higher cause, you know?
No, absolutely. And that's why they call it Global Citizen, you know, and global feminism.
I love
it.
I love that.
It really is. So if anyone listening, do check out globalcitizen.org if you want to learn more on how you can get involved as well too.
And you can also look up the Circle .ngo. We're there. We have a little website, and we're working our socks off,
absolutely,
and, you know, behind the scenes as well.
I'd encourage you actually, check out the Circle and the fantastic work they're doing at the moment, because it really is incredibly important and remarkable as well too. But finally, I just want to say thank you so much for coming in and sitting down.
It's such a pleasure. I'm so delighted to share this conversation with you, and I wish you all the very best wherever you go, because I know that you're a man of integrity, and I really honour you that you are taking this on board, that you're connecting with something bigger than your own. I mean, you must, as an artist, pursue your own interests and development as an artist, but incorporating the bigger picture, I think, is the ultimate thing that any artist can do. And I just honour you so much, Andrew, for being that person.
Thank you. And the feeling is absolutely mutual. So
we like each other, folks.
We
get on well.
do. But it's a pleasure, and it's an honour sitting down with you again. Thank you, Annie Lennox, for joining me today.
And I could cry.
Cry Power is made in association with Global Citizen, a movement of activists all over the world who are using their collective voice to end extreme poverty by 2030. You can head to globalcitizen.org/crypower to take action on any of the issues we talk about on this show and earn tickets to gigs all over the world by signing petitions, writing emails, or sending tweets to world leaders. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Cry Power podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts right now. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Hozier, and this is Cry Power.